Hi, welcome to the second short lecture on Chapter 4. In this lecture, we're going to consider the 5 W's. And those of you who are studying journalism will already know what the W's are. They refer to 5 questions: who, what, when, where, and why, that we can ask when we're reading a poem in order to better understand what a poem actually says. When we ask who, we're really asking about the speaker of the poem. What do we know about that speaker? Are we able to identify who the speaker actually is? When we ask what, we're simply trying to find out what objects or events are being presented. When we ask when, we're trying to determine when the poem takes place. Do we know the time of day or the time of year? We also want to ask where. What do we know about the setting of the poem? Where is its location? And finally, why? Why is this information being conveyed at all? We may not be told explicitly in a particular poem why the information is being conveyed, but if we use our knowledge of allusion, for example, the various battles that were mentioned in Sandburg's poem The Grass, or the allusion to silence is golden in Steele's epitaph. And if we also think about denotation and connotation, and the type of poem, is it a lyric, is it a narrative, etc., we'll be in a better place to draw our own conclusions. Let's take a look at Fire and Ice by Robert Frost and see if we can't answer some of these questions. Fire and ice. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. Let's start with who. Who is the speaker of this poem? We don't know. It's an anonymous speaker. And then what is being conveyed in the poem? Well, the idea that fire and ice are 2 ways the world might end. When does the poem take place? We don't know. Where does the poem take place? We don't know. Why is this information being conveyed at all? Well, to help us understand that both extremes, fire and ice, or desire and hate, can be equally destructive. Typically, a poet will not omit this information, things like the speaker's identity, or the time, or the setting, unless there's a reason. So it's not accidental. We want to ask ourselves, why is some of this information being withheld? Let's start with the speaker. To understand why we have an anonymous speaker, we have to look at the first 2 lines of the poem. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. We're not even entirely sure who the some refers to because it's a generalization. But it's likely that some refers to people who are making pronouncements about the end of the world. They might be doing this from a religious perspective. They might be doing it from a scientific perspective. But regardless, there's disagreement among the people having this conversation about how the world will end. Then we shift to our speaker, and we start to understand that this speaker has experienced desire and knows something of hate, and ultimately equates desire with fire and hate with ice, and finds that both of these things can be equally destructive. Fire and ice, desire and hate. The benefit of having an anonymous speaker in this poem is that when we shift away from groups of people making pronouncements and move to the individual, that speaker becomes more accessible to individual readers. The reader doesn't have to identify with a particular group or perspective, and in that way becomes more open to the speaker's point, which is that these extremes are equally destructive. If Frost had given us more information, a time of day or time of year, or a location, he would have made this poem much more specific. But the message that the speaker's conveying is not that specific. It needs a more generalized perspective on the end of the world to bring us to the understanding that both hate and desire can be equally destructive. I encourage you to use the 5 W's as you look at other poems in the chapter. See what information you can call out about what the poem actually says, and then go back and look at where information might be missing and ask, why is that information missing, and what more does that tell us about the poem?